My name's Mark, and I've been married to Lisa for 9 years. We met in college. She was this fiery, sarcastic, hilarious woman who lit up every room she walked into. She could make me laugh until my sides hurt, and at the time, I thought her blunt, no-nonsense attitude was refreshing. I guess it blinded me to the darker side of that personality. Our marriage was good, or at least I thought so. We had 2 kids together, Ava, 7, and Caleb, 5. We lived in a nice house in the suburbs, both worked steady jobs, and had what most people would call a normal life. She worked in marketing and I'm in IT. It wasn't glamorous, but it worked, or so I thought. About 6 months ago, things started feeling off. Lisa was on her phone constantly. She'd smile at her screen, but when I'd ask what was so funny, she'd shrug and say it was just a dumb meme from work. It wasn't just that, though. She started coming home late, claiming she had last-minute deadlines. I'm not a naturally suspicious person, but I couldn't ignore the changes. Lisa stopped being interested in family activities. She'd roll her eyes when I suggested we go on a date night or when the kids wanted to do something simple like a movie night. And then there were the excuses. One weekend, she needed space and took off for a solo spa day. Another time, she said she had a work retreat on a Sunday, which felt weird but plausible. At first, I told myself it was stress. Her job had always been demanding, and she was the kind of person who didn't know how to say no. But the excuses kept piling up, and so did the uneasiness in my gut. I pushed it down, though. After all, this was Lisa, my wife, the mother of my kids. She wouldn't betray me, right? Looking back now, I feel stupid for ignoring all the signs. But hindsight's always 20/20ths. Everything changed on a random Tuesday. It was one of those days where nothing remarkable happened. Work was dull, the kids were bickering over who got to pick the TV show, and Lisa was late. Again. She strolled in around 9 p.m. with a breezy sorry. Babe, work ran late. But as she hugged me, I caught it. A scent that didn't belong. Lisa always wore this subtle floral perfume. But this was sharp and musky, definitely not hers. I didn't say anything right then. Could have been from work, maybe a coworker's cologne rubbed off, right? I convinced myself not to jump to conclusions. That night, though, I couldn't sleep. My mind kept replaying that moment, dissecting her every word, her every move, the way she tossed her bag carelessly by the couch and went straight to the shower, the way she avoided looking me in the eye. By Friday, the itch to know what was going on had become unbearable. I'm not proud of it, but I decided to snoop. Lisa had left her laptop open on the kitchen table while she was upstairs tucking in the kids. I opened her email, fully expecting to find nothing. After all, Lisa was smart. Too smart to leave obvious evidence lying around. I almost closed the laptop when something caught my eye. An email thread with someone named Chris. I knew Chris, he was one of her coworkers. Lisa mentioned him occasionally, always in passing, like he wasn't a big deal. The subject line read, "Last night smirking face." My heart pounded as I clicked it. The email wasn't long, but it was enough. "I can't stop thinking about you. Last night was, God, I don't even have words. You looked amazing. Can't wait to see you at lunch. Same spot." I stared at the screen, my hands trembling. Lunch? Same spot? What the hell was happening? Before I could scroll further, I heard Lisa's footsteps on the stairs. Panicking, I closed the laptop and pretended to be scrolling on my phone. She walked in, her hair damp from the shower, and gave me one of her classic Lisa smirks. "What's with the face?" she asked. "Nothing." I lied, my voice tight. "Just tired." She shrugged, kissed my cheek, and headed to bed like nothing was wrong. But something was very wrong. That night, I decided to dig deeper. If Lisa was cheating on me, I needed proof. And if this Chris thought he could swoop into my life and wreck it, he had another thing coming. The next morning, I felt like a detective in a bad TV drama. While Lisa was busy making pancakes for the kids, I took my opportunity to check her phone. It was charging on the kitchen counter, and I quickly swiped it up, retreating to the bathroom under the guise of needing a shower. To my frustration, her messages with Chris weren't there. Either she was smart enough to delete them, or they were chatting somewhere else. That's when I remembered. Lisa used Snapchat all the time. I opened the app and, sure enough, there he was, Chris, with that ridiculous bitmoji of his smirking like an idiot. Their chat history was empty. Classic Snapchat with its disappearing messages. But at the top of the screen was a saved photo, a picture of an empty wine bottle and 2 glasses on what looked like a hotel nightstand. My blood ran cold. I had no idea when the photo was taken or where it happened, but the implication was clear. Lisa wasn't just flirting with Chris. She was fully involved. That day, I couldn't look at her the same way. Every word out of her mouth felt like a lie. Even her laugh when she played with the kids grated on me. How could she be so carefree when she was doing this to our family? Still, I didn't confront her. Not yet. I wanted more than a single photo. I wanted the full story. So, I did what any desperate, heartbroken man would do. I started tracking her. Lisa had always been careless with technology. She used the same password for everything, and I knew it by heart. That evening, I installed a GPS tracker on her phone. It wasn't legal, and it definitely wasn't ethical, but I didn't care. I needed the truth, even if it meant crossing a line. For the first few days, nothing unusual happened. Lisa's movements were predictable: work, the grocery store, the kids' school. I started to wonder if I was losing my mind, if maybe I had overreacted. But on Thursday, everything changed. Her location pinged at a place I didn't recognize. Somewhere on the outskirts of town, far from her office. I zoomed in on the map and saw it was a motel. A freaking motel. My heart pounded as I stared at the screen, watching her dot stay in the same spot for over an hour. I felt sick. This wasn't just some emotional affair. This was physical. When Lisa finally came home that night, she acted like nothing had happened. She kissed me on the cheek, asked how my day was, and even offered to put the kids to bed. I could barely look at her. The next step was clear. I had to see it for myself. If she was going to keep lying to my face, I needed undeniable proof. And I was ready to catch her in the act. I didn't sleep that night. My mind was racing with all the possibilities: what I'd say, what I'd do if I caught them. Would I yell? Would I hit Chris? Or would I just freeze? The next day, I told my boss I needed the afternoon off for a family emergency. It wasn't a lie, not really. I dropped the kids at school and waited for Lisa to leave for work. Then I followed her. My heart was pounding as I trailed her car through town, careful to keep my distance. She drove to her office first, and I almost relaxed, thinking maybe I'd been wrong. But after less than 20 minutes, she left again. I followed her as she drove out of the city, eventually pulling into the parking lot of the same rundown motel from the GPS tracker. I parked a few spaces away and watched as she stepped out of the car, dressed in the same business casual clothes she'd left home in. Chris was already there, leaning against his car like he didn't have a care in the world. He grinned when he saw her, and they exchanged a quick kiss before heading inside. I sat there, frozen. Seeing it in real time was like a punch to the gut. The woman I'd built my life with, the mother of my children, was walking into a motel with another man. But I wasn't going to just sit there and take it. I got out of the car and followed them inside. The motel was as grimy as you'd expect. Peeling wallpaper, flickering lights, and a receptionist who barely glanced at me as I walked past. I didn't know what I was going to do, but I was beyond caring. I found their room, number 14. My hands were shaking as I raised them to knock, but then I stopped. Instead, I crouched down and looked through the narrow gap of the curtains. Inside, they were sitting on the bed, laughing like they didn't have a care in the world. Lisa had taken off her blazer, and Chris was leaning toward her, his hand on her knee. I wanted to burst in, to scream at them, to break something. But instead, I pulled out my phone and started recording. I didn't stop until I had enough. A minute or two of footage that showed them all over each other. Proof, undeniable and irrefutable. Then I walked back to my car and drove home, shaking with a mix of rage, heartbreak, and adrenaline. Lisa didn't come home until late that night, her usual excuses on hand. Work ran over. Then I grabbed drinks with Sarah. I just nodded, playing along. But I wasn't going to play along for long. The confrontation was coming, and this time I'd be ready. I didn't wait long to confront Lisa. The very next evening, after the kids were in bed, I told her we needed to talk. She was sitting on the couch scrolling through her phone, sipping wine like she didn't have a care in the world. "What's up?" she asked casually, not even looking up. I stared at her for a moment, my chest tight. "I know, Lisa." That got her attention. She glanced up, confused. "Know what?" I didn't say a word. I just pulled out my phone, opened the video I'd taken at the motel, and handed it to her. She watched in silence, her face turning pale. When it ended, she looked at me, wide-eyed and frozen. "Mark, I can explain." "Explain what?" I snapped back. "Explain how you're sleeping with your coworker in some disgusting motel, while I'm here holding down the fort with our kids? Please, Lisa, enlighten me." She stuttered, trying to find the words. "It's not what you think." I laughed bitterly. "Oh, really? Because it looks exactly like my wife cheating on me." Her face twisted into something ugly, part guilt, part anger. "You had no right to spy on me. Do you even hear yourself? Installing trackers, following me like some psycho? That's insane, Mark." Her deflection just made me angrier. "Don't you dare try to make this about me. You're the one sneaking off to motels with Chris, not me." At that, her defenses crumbled, and she let out an exasperated sigh. "Fine. Yes, I've been seeing Chris, but it's not like it's serious or anything. It's just a distraction." "A distraction?" My voice cracked with disbelief. "From what? Your husband who's been nothing but loyal to you? Our family?" She rolled her eyes, and that's when I saw the real Lisa. The cold, selfish side I'd ignored for years. "I don't know, Mark. Maybe from feeling stuck. Do you have any idea how boring our life has become? It's the same thing every day: work, kids, dinner, bed. Chris makes me feel alive." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "So you destroyed our marriage because you were bored? You couldn't just talk to me about how you were feeling?" "Talk to you?" she shot back, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "Mark, you're always either at work or glued to your computer. When was the last time you actually looked at me, let alone made me feel special?" Her words hit me like a slap. Part of me wanted to argue, to defend myself, but I couldn't ignore the kernel of truth in what she said. Maybe I hadn't been as attentive as I should have been, but none of that excused what she'd done. "You know what?" I said, my voice calm despite the storm raging inside me. "This isn't about what I did or didn't do. This is about you breaking your vows and lying to my face. And if you think I'm just going to roll over and forgive this, you're dead wrong." She looked startled for a moment, then her expression hardened. "Fine. If that's how you feel, maybe we should just call it quits."
Ist der her, stumt?
She said it so casually, like we were deciding what to have for dinner. After nearly a decade of marriage, this was her solution? "Maybe we should," I said quietly, feeling the weight of those words settle over me. Lisa stood abruptly and walked upstairs without another word, leaving me alone on the couch with a marriage that was crumbling before my eyes. But this wasn't the end. Not yet. There were still the kids to think about, and I wasn't going to let Lisa walk away from this without consequences. The next morning was surreal. Lisa acted as if our blowout argument hadn't even happened. She made breakfast for the kids, humming to herself like we weren't on the brink of a complete meltdown. Meanwhile, I could barely function, my head still spinning from the night before. As soon as Ava and Caleb were off to school, I told Lisa we needed to talk again. She rolled her eyes but followed me into the living room. "What now, Mark?" she sighed, flopping onto the couch. "I've been thinking about what you said," I began, trying to keep my voice steady. "And about the kids. They deserve better than this mess." Her face softened slightly, but I wasn't finished. "I'm filing for divorce, Lisa." Her eyes widened. "You're seriously going to break up our family over this? Over one mistake?" "One mistake," I snapped. "This wasn't a mistake, Lisa. It was a series of deliberate choices. You chose to betray me, to lie to my face, to risk everything we've built. You don't get to minimize that." She scoffed, crossing her arms. "You're being dramatic." You think divorce is going to be better for the kids? Tearing their lives apart because you can't handle a little imperfection? Her words made me pause. Divorce wasn't what I wanted, not really. I wanted to go back in time to fix whatever had gone wrong before it got to this point. But there was no going back. Lisa had made sure of that. I'm not the one who tore this family apart, I said quietly. You did. And now we have to deal with the consequences. Lisa didn't respond. She just stared at me, her expression unreadable. Finally, she stood and walked out of the room, muttering under her breath about me being too sensitive. That afternoon I called a lawyer. It felt surreal, like I was living someone else's life. I had always thought divorce was something that happened to other people, not us. But here I was, laying out my entire marriage to a stranger in a suit, discussing custody arrangements and financial splits. By the end of the meeting, I felt drained but determined. I wasn't going to let Lisa's selfishness ruin my life or my kids' lives any more than it already had. When I got home, Lisa was on the phone in the backyard. She didn't see me walk in, but I heard enough to know she wasn't talking to her mom or a friend. No, he's being ridiculous, she said, her voice sharp. Yeah, I'll handle it. Don't worry. She laughed softly, and my stomach turned. When she hung up and came inside, I asked, "Was that Chris?" She froze for a split second before recovering. None of your business. Her defiance made my decision even easier. If she thought I was going to sit around while she kept sneaking around, she had another thing coming. Actually, it is my business, I said firmly. You're in my house on my time, and I'm not going to tolerate this anymore. Her eyes narrowed. What's that supposed to mean? It means the papers are being drawn up, Lisa. This is happening, whether you like it or not. She glared at me, but for once, she didn't have a snappy comeback. Instead, she stormed upstairs, slamming the bedroom door behind her. I felt a strange mix of emotions. Relief, anger, sadness, but mostly, I felt free. For the first time in months, maybe years, I was taking control of my life. And I wasn't going to let Lisa drag me down with her. The road ahead was going to be messy, but at least I was finally moving forward. The days that followed were a whirlwind of tension and passive-aggressive silence. Lisa and I barely spoke, communicating only when absolutely necessary about the kids. I kept my plans to myself, quietly packing away important documents and preparing for the next steps. But then, something happened that I didn't see coming. One evening, while Lisa was out running errands, there was a knock at the door. I opened it to find a man standing there, tall, broad-shouldered, and furious. "Are you Mark?" he asked, his voice tight with barely contained rage. "Yeah. Who are you?" He shoved a folded piece of paper into my chest. "I'm Dan, Chris's husband." The world seemed to tilt. "Husband?" I repeated, dumbfounded. "That's right," Dan said, stepping inside without waiting for an invitation. "I found out about your wife and my husband a couple of weeks ago." Chris didn't even have the guts to admit it. I found their texts on his work tablet. Then I started digging. Turns out your wife isn't exactly subtle. I stood there, stunned, as he dropped a stack of printouts on my coffee table. They were screenshots. Texts between Lisa and Chris, emails, even pictures I hadn't seen before. Some of them were graphic, others just nauseatingly intimate. "I thought you deserved to know," Dan said, his voice softer now. "I've already filed for divorce. I hope you're doing the same." "I am," I managed to say, still trying to process what he just told me. "But, thank you. I had no idea Chris was married." Dan let out a bitter laugh. "Yeah, well, neither did half the women in his department, apparently. Turns out Lisa isn't his first." My stomach churned at the thought. How long had this been going on? How many lies had Lisa told me? Before he left, Dan gave me his number and told me to reach out if I needed anything. It was strange, bonding with a stranger over shared betrayal, but it also felt oddly comforting. At least I wasn't alone in this mess. When Lisa came home later that night, I was ready for her. "Chris is married," I said the moment she walked through the door. She froze, her keys halfway to the counter. "What are you talking about?" Don't play dumb, Lisa. His husband came here tonight. He showed me everything. Your texts, your pictures, all of it. Her face went pale, then red. He had no right to. No right. I interrupted, my voice rising. You're seriously mad at him? Lisa, you've been cheating with a married man. Do you have any idea how disgusting that is? She didn't even try to deny it this time. Instead, she crossed her arms and glared at me. So what? You've already decided to divorce me. Why do you care? Why do I care? I said, incredulous. Because you've not only destroyed our marriage but dragged our entire family into your mess. And now I find out this guy's been doing the same thing to his husband. Lisa shrugged, her expression cold. Chris's marriage isn't my problem. Her indifference was the final nail in the coffin for me. This wasn't the woman I thought I married. Get out, I said, my voice calm but firm. She blinked. What? You heard me. Pack a bag and leave. Go stay with Chris or a friend or whoever the hell you want. But you're not staying here. For the first time, I saw a flicker of uncertainty in her eyes. Mark, you can't just kick me out. This is my house too. Not for long, I said, walking to the front door and opening it. Now, get out before the kids wake up and see this. She hesitated for a moment, then stormed upstairs, muttering under her breath. 15 minutes later, she came down with a suitcase, glaring at me as she walked out the door. The moment it clicked shut behind her, I felt an overwhelming sense of relief. For the first time in months, the house was quiet, peaceful. But I knew this was far from over. The real fight was just beginning. The first night after Lisa left was eerily silent. I sat in the living room, staring at the walls, unsure of what to do with myself. The kids were still at my parents' house, where I'd sent them earlier that day to shield them from the chaos. For the first time in years, I was alone, and it hit me hard. The next morning, I dove into action. I wanted to be ready when Lisa inevitably tried to play games, especially when it came to the kids. I called my lawyer and told her everything about Chris, about Dan, even about the texts and photos Dan had shared with me. This is going to be messy, she warned. But you've got a solid case for custody, especially if you document everything. Documenting everything became my new obsession. I created a folder on my computer labeled Evidence and filled it with screenshots, emails, and notes about every lie Lisa had told me over the past few months. I even started journaling, recording my thoughts and observations in case they'd be useful later. It wasn't just about protecting myself legally, it was about regaining some control. Lisa had thrown my life into chaos, and this was my way of taking it back. But while I was busy preparing for battle, Lisa was plotting her next move. A few days after she left, she showed up at the house unannounced. I was in the middle of making lunch for the kids, who had just come back home. Ava and Caleb were thrilled to see her, running up to hug her as she walked through the door. I gave her a cold nod, trying to keep things civil for the kids' sake. "What are you doing here, Lisa?" "I'm here to see my children," she said, her voice dripping with faux innocence. "That's still allowed, isn't it?" I didn't argue. Instead, I stepped aside and let her spend some time with the kids, all the while keeping a close eye on her. When the kids went upstairs to play, Lisa turned to me with a smirk. "You're not going to win this, Mark. I'm their mother. No court is going to keep me away from them." I crossed my arms, refusing to take the bait. "We'll see what the court decides, Lisa. Until then, don't pull any stunts. The kids don't deserve to be caught in the middle of this." She rolled her eyes, grabbing her purse. "Whatever. I'll be back next week to pick them up for my weekend." The audacity of her confidence stunned me. She acted like she had the upper hand, like none of this was her fault. Later that evening, I got a call from Dan. "Hey, Mark," he said, his voice tense. "You're not going to believe this, but Chris is trying to smooth things over. He wants me to take him back." I nearly dropped the phone. "What? After everything?" "Yeah," Dan said bitterly. "He says Lisa's a mistake, and that he still loves me. Honestly, I don't know what to do." We ended up talking for nearly an hour, sharing war stories and trying to make sense of the wreckage our lives had become. By the end of the call, we'd both come to the same conclusion. Lisa and Chris weren't just cheaters, they were manipulators. And neither of us was going to let them win. That night, I finally started to feel a glimmer of hope. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was fighting back. For myself, for my kids, and for the life I deserved. But Lisa wasn't done yet. Not by a long shot. I should have known Lisa wouldn't go quietly. She was too proud, too stubborn to admit she'd lost control of the situation. It started a week later when I got an email from her lawyer. Lisa was demanding joint custody and a fair division of our assets, including the house. She claimed that my behavior, spying on her, installing trackers, proved I was controlling and unfit to be the primary parent. I slammed my laptop shut, my blood boiling. She was trying to flip the script, to make me look like the villain when she was the one who tore our family apart. My lawyer assured me we had the upper hand. "The evidence is on your side," she said confidently. "Lisa's infidelity and abandonment are major factors in custody decisions. Just stay calm and let the process play out." But staying calm wasn't easy when Lisa was actively trying to sabotage me. One afternoon, I got a call from Ava's school. The principal wanted to speak with me about an incident involving Lisa. Apparently, Lisa had shown up unannounced during Ava's lunch break, causing a scene when the staff wouldn't let her take Ava off campus. The principal told me she seemed agitated and unreasonable, which only made the situation worse. Ava had been upset for the rest of the day, confused and embarrassed by her mom's behavior. When I confronted Lisa about it later, she acted like it was no big deal. "I just wanted to spend time with my daughter," she said with a shrug. "You can't control every little thing I do, Mark." "This isn't about control," I snapped. "It's about what's best for the kids. And pulling stunts like that isn't it." She just rolled her eyes and walked away, muttering something about me being ridiculous. But Lisa wasn't done yet. The next bombshell came a few days later when I received a text from Chris. At first, I couldn't believe it. It was the last person I expected to hear from. "Hey Mark, I think we need to talk. Call me when you can." I debated whether to respond, but curiosity got the better of me. When I called, Chris's voice was shaky, almost apologetic. "Look, I know I'm the last person you want to hear from," he said. "But Lisa, she's out of control. She's been trying to drag me into this custody mess, saying if I testify for her, she'll tell the court I'm a great guy or whatever." I leaned back in my chair, stunned. "She's blackmailing you?" "Basically," he said. "But I'm not going along with it. I just wanted you to know she's desperate. Be careful." His warning sent chills down my spine. Lisa wasn't just trying to win. She was willing to burn everything to the ground to get what she wanted. The final straw came the following weekend when she showed up at the house unannounced again. This time with a police officer in tow. "What the hell is this?" I asked as I opened the door. Lisa stood there, smug as ever. "I'm here to pick up the kids. I have every right to see them, Mark." The officer, clearly uncomfortable, explained that Lisa had filed a report claiming I was withholding visitation. I couldn't believe the lengths she was willing to go to. I calmly explained the custody arrangement and showed him the temporary court order stating that Lisa's visitation was scheduled for the following weekend. He nodded and told Lisa she'd have to leave. As she stormed off, she glared at me and hissed, "You're going to regret this." That night, I made sure every lock on the house was secure, my evidence folder was updated, and my lawyer was informed of everything. Lisa was spiraling, and I had a feeling she wasn't done yet. But I was ready for whatever came next. For the first time, I felt confident that I could weather the storm and come out stronger on the other side. Lisa's latest stunt with the police might have rattled me before, but by now I was prepared. My lawyer filed an emergency motion with the court, detailing Lisa's erratic behavior and attempts to manipulate custody proceedings. The court hearing was scheduled quickly, and it felt like a showdown. Lisa showed up with her lawyer, exuding that same arrogant confidence she always wore like armor. I, on the other hand, came armed with everything. The screenshots Dan had given me, the video from the motel, the texts from Chris warning me about her schemes, and statements from the school principal about her meltdown. The judge didn't look impressed as Lisa's lawyer tried to paint me as a paranoid, controlling husband. When it was my turn, I laid it all out. The affair, the lies, the blackmail attempts, the unhinged scene at Ava's school. I kept my voice calm and factual, even when recounting the worst of it. Lisa's mask cracked when the judge turned to her and asked if she had anything to say about the evidence I'd presented. She stammered, her carefully rehearsed indignation replaced by visible panic. This is just him trying to punish me, she blurted. He's always been like this, controlling, overbearing. The judge cut her off. Mrs. Williams, the court isn't interested in deflections. The evidence presented paints a concerning picture of your behavior. By the end of the hearing, I was granted primary custody of Ava and Caleb. Lisa was given supervised visitation until further notice, pending a psychological evaluation. The relief was overwhelming, but it was bittersweet. I wished it didn't have to come to this. Lisa cornered me in the hallway after the hearing. "You think you've won?" she hissed. "This isn't over, Mark." "I don't care if it's over or not," I said, meeting her gaze. "My priority is the kids. That's all that matters now." Over the next few weeks, Lisa's presence in our lives became a shadow of what it once was. She attended her supervised visits, but it was clear even to the kids that something had changed. Ava, always perceptive, asked me one night, "Why doesn't Mommy stay with us anymore?" I took a deep breath and told her the truth, as gently as I could. Sometimes grown-ups make mistakes, and it means they need some time to figure things out. But I'm here for you, always. As for Lisa, she eventually moved in with Chris because of course she did. I didn't care. Let them ruin each other's lives. Dan and I kept in touch sporadically, checking in to trade updates and offer support. He told me Chris was already showing signs of regret, and all I could do was laugh. Life wasn't perfect, but it was better. I focused on rebuilding my home, my routine, and my relationship with Ava and Caleb. I started therapy too because as much as I wanted to believe I could handle everything on my own, I knew I needed help processing the betrayal. One night, after the kids were asleep, I sat on the porch with a beer in hand, thinking about how much had changed. I wasn't angry anymore, not really. If anything, I felt pity for Lisa. She had traded a stable, loving family for a fleeting thrill and ended up losing everything. To anyone reading this who might be going through something similar, don't ignore the red flags. Trust your gut, document everything, and don't be afraid to stand up for yourself. It's a painful journey, but there's light on the other side. As for me, I'm still figuring things out, but for the first time in a long time, I feel hopeful. And that's a pretty good place to start. Thank you for staying with me. This crazy journey is finally over and I'm ready for what's next. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any more interesting stories. And leave a comment with what you would do in this situation. See you in the next videos.